Alright guys, first off, as always, good day. I'm glad you're here. So this video is about the when Rome really starts to become a dominant force and they start to take on leaders. Particularly instead of a republic, they take on one leader. And we're going to talk about one very famous one who kind of gets forgotten, but he did more than a lot of other of the emperors. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. So, the objective today, analyze how Julius Caesar is more known than any other Roman leader. I'm sure you guys have heard the name before, one way or another, either on pop culture or movies, things like that. So, the next one, objective, examine the difference and similarities between Greek slaves and other slaves. We're going to be talking about that. And the last one is create an argument on whether supposed to be the fires in Insulating would have happened in the Pax Romana times. All right, so keep those in the back of your mind because don't forget, at the very end of the exit ticket, I'm going to be using these as a exit ticket question. Okay, so keep those in mind. So here is your warm-up picture. All right, very simple. I think I put on there what are two things that you see. Quite simple. Okay. And then what do you think is happening in this picture? So if you read the bottom part, that should give you some hint. Okay, so go ahead, write this part, pause the video because we are moving on in 3, 2, 1. So here's the thing. We're going to start off with a question, which is, when you hear the name Julius Caesar, what comes to your mind? Julius Caesar. All right, is it an item? Is it an image? What is it? Okay, now some of you guys who've played one particular type of game, it's actually a franchise, you may know the name Julius Caesar from it, which is okay, which is, with me, all fine. How you guys learn about people, whether it's on video games, music, movies, TV shows, I'm all for it. It's just, I hope you realize that not everything they tell you is the truth. Okay, that's where you got to research it for yourself. So, again, when you hear the name, what pops in your mind? All right, so give you time to write. So, again, pause the video if you're not done because we're moving on in 3, 2, 1. All right, so in class we talked about how Rome started off as a little town and it became a gargantuan empire. Basically, what happened was Rome was a republic, right? The people voted, the people had the power, and things like that. Now, there were two groups of citizens, the patricians and the plebeians. Now, the thing is, both could vote. Okay, they are citizens of Rome, but only the patricians could become government officials. Okay, that's like the only stipulation between the two. Now there were two chief councils, chief officers in Rome. They were the consuls and the praetors. Okay, now the praetors, they have a unique job in which they were in charge of civil law. So things that were happening inside Rome, that was their job. Okay, and the thing is, as Rome grew, as the empire grew and grew and grew, so did their responsibilities. And they ended up basically being judges in cases involving non-citizens. So if it was citizen versus citizen, then they would basically go to a regular type of court, you know. But if it was a citizen versus a non-citizen, then a praetor could basically be the judge and from their judgment say who was guilty, who's innocent, things like that. Okay. So in the first century BC, so about 100 BC, Rome really started to have some problems. Rival senators basically started forming groups, and they started fighting for power. So if you've seen how politics are nowadays with the Republicans and Democrats, basically the same type of thing. And this created, disorder in the Senate to the point where they're no longer doing things; they are basically fighting each other, trying to um, stop one another from gaining power, as opposed to doing what's best for Rome. So what happened is these Roman leaders started recruiting armies. They would get like hired gun people, of course back then they didn't have guns, but hired soldiers, things like that. And these guys swore an allegiance to the generals, of these fractions and not Rome itself. So their allegiance went from country to this group. It's group over country, which is always a bad thing. And when that happened, civil war breaks out. Excuse me. Now, the term civil war doesn't mean like, oh, excuse me, I'm going to shoot you now. Poo poo, there you go. Haha, you died. No, not like that type of civil. A civil war means when people in a country fight each other. So citizen versus citizen. That's called a civil war. And that's what happened in Rome for about 50 years. They started fighting each other. Now, one of the main people to come out of this was Julius Caesar. And he basically defeated forces in Pompeii. Basically, it was him versus another faction. He won. Now, the thing is, Julius Caesar actually had other jobs before, but again, because of time, I didn't get to go through it all. But he was actually put in charge of Rome for a while. And he had this taste for power and things like that. So after this victory in Pompeii, he is named dictator in 45 BC. Dictator means absolute ruler. Now the thing is, if you ever watched the play Julius Caesar, people thought something like his closest friends and closest confidants, allies and things like that. They thought he was getting too big. He was becoming too powerful, and they ended up stabbing him. Basically ganging up and just shanking him. Even his best friend Brutus, and that's when the famous "et te Brute," et tu Brute, and it means "and you, Brutus, and you." It was just a total shock to him. But yeah, he dies, and his grandnephew Octavian takes over. Now Octavian is basically, like, I'm getting revenge, and he goes after everyone, and he eventually goes after Mark Antony, which is Julius Caesar's like best friend, and kills him. Okay, him and Cleopatra the Seventh. Okay. Now here's my question to you: do you think political parties in our country would ever rise to what happened in Rome, where they would basically start gathering armies? Start getting their followers, making sure that they're armed, that they have guns, things like that, and then basically have them fight one another, things like that. Do you think it will ever get to that point? Why? Yes or no? What do you think, and why? So put your thoughts down, okay? Because that's how it was in Rome at that time. They were getting armies, hiring people, as soldiers, and then duking it out, And it wasn't like some battlefield. Sometimes it was in towns and things like that. So imagine here in the U.S. where Republican army versus goes against a Democrat army, and they start fighting in like St. Louis or Chicago or Clovis. So go ahead, pause the video if you're still writing, and we're moving on in 3, 2, 1. So 27 BC, the Senate gave Octavian the title of Augustus. Okay, now Augustus is a new title. Basically, that's what they're calling him, the leader, thing like that. So from 31 BC to 14 AD, This is known as the age of Augustus. Now, if you look, it goes from 31 BC to 14 AD. So it goes all the way down 30 BC, 29 BC, 28 BC, all the way down to 0, and then 1 AD, 2 AD, 3 AD. So 14 years plus 31 years. So that's 45 years right there, known as the age of Augustus. Augustus was very popular to the Roman people. But the thing is, their main source of power that he had, it came from the army. Because they basically just ran over everybody, and they were a force to reckon with. They were a juggernaut. Now, the Senate, as time went on, they're like, man, this guy's awesome. They gave him the title of Imperator. Now, that sounds like a lot like another word. Imperator. Imperator. Emperor. Emperor. So Augustus is the first emperor of the Roman Empire. Now, this next part, this last part at the very bottom, this will definitely be on your test. Okay? What does AD mean? I love this when I used to teach this in class. I would ask, what does AD mean? What does BC mean first? Everyone said before Christ, before Christ. Yeah, very good, very good. What does AD mean? After death, after death. AD means Anno Domini. And if you know Spanish, because this is Latin, año, which means year, and Dios, Domini, meaning Lord. So, in the year of our Lord. That's what AD means. In the year of our Lord, Anno Domini. All right, it does not mean after death. That's one of those things, that mandala thing I was telling you guys about, where people hear it, they think it's true, but it's not. AD after that, because of course BC is before Christ, AD is after death. But think about it, if the clock goes at 0, right? BC goes from 5 BC, 4 BC, 3 BC, 2 BC, 1 BC, 0, and all of a sudden it starts at 1 AD, 2 AD, 3 AD. So you're telling me the year of Jesus was not even a year and he died? No. So that's the thing. That's how you can always remember it doesn't mean after death, because Jesus wasn't a baby when he died. We go by the Christian calendar. So it's like, wait, no, that doesn't make sense. That doesn't work. So, or is there 0 for 32 years? Okay. That's how you can always remember. And so again, I'm going to ask you guys this in class again, when it'll be sporadic. What does AD mean? Because this is one of those things I want you guys to know. And for those of you guys who had me before, I ask you all the time, what does AD mean? What does AD mean? Okay, so get that in your head. Anno Domini, the year of our Lord. It does not mean after death. Test your parents out. See if they know. So here's your next question. Why do you think people remember the name of Caesar, Julius Caesar, more than Augustus? When Augustus did a heck of a lot more. Augustus did so much more, was in power for so much longer. But everyone remembers Julius Caesar. You don't rarely ever hear anybody go, oh yes, Augustus, yeah, Octavian, yeah, that dude, yeah. They don't. So why do you think Caesar is more remembered than Augustus? Okay, so think about it, write it out, press pause, because we're going to be moving on in 3, 2, 1. All right, so luckily for Rome, after Augustus, there's a series of really good emperors. I mean, we're talking really good. Nerva, Trajan, Hadrian, Marcus Aurelius is by far one of my favorites. I mean, the dude was very smart, expanded the empire. How did they maintain, being considered the best? They did several things. One, they treated the ruling classes with respect. right? They didn't think like, oh, I'm Chingon, I'm the emperor, I'm Mr. You got to bow down to me type of thing. No, they were like, let's work together. Okay. Yeah, I am the emperor. Yeah, my word is final and some of that, but I want to hear what you have to say. Okay. And the lower part of the ruling class, tell me what you say. Even though I know you're not the biggest, most influential, the wealthiest, you're still in that group. I want to hear what you have to say. So people liked that. Um, Ended arbitrary execution, so just not randomly killing people just because, oh, you said something bad about me, kill you. No, none of that stuff. They maintained peace in the empire. So anytime there was an attack, they responded, bam, like that. Ended that fighting going on. A lot of times the Germanic tribes, if you look at the map, they're up north. Um, those German tribes would attack those border areas, and the Romans, would send fleets of just soldiers and squash them fast. Make sure they went back where they came from. The other one is support domestic policies, and these policies were not just good for the top class, but they were good for everyone. Running water, you know, um, nice buildings, um, you know, the fountains and things like that made the place look nice and pretty, and just made Rome better. Again, not just for the top class, but for everybody. Okay? This time is known as Pax Romana, and it lasted for about 200 years. So for about 200 years, everything was really almost perfect. The more closer you were to Rome, the better. Now, as you spread out, yeah, especially near the edges, you might be worried about attacks, but um, the closer you are to Rome, the better life was for you. All right, so here's my question to you. Do you think our country will ever have a Pax Romana, like a time of peace, where we're really doing well? We don't have much problems going on in the country, and if we do, they're settled, bam, quick, fast, and in a hurry. Um, there's not much bickering going on, things like that. People are living well. People are having a good life. People are proud of where they're coming from and things like that. So, do you think we'll ever get to that, or we'll ever have one? Okay, even if it's just 5 years, do you think we'll ever have that in our country? Um, the second question is, do you think it would be easier or harder to maintain peace and prosperity? Prosperity being meaning successfulness. Do you think it'd be easier to maintain it, to keep it going, or do you think it'd be harder to keep it going? So you tell me, what do you think? And give an example. Like, if you think it's going to be easier, give me an example. Why would it be easier? If you think it would be harder, give me an example why you think it would be harder. All right, or a scenario. You know, set something up like, well, if this was this, then chances are it would be harder. Chances are it would be easier. So give me an example or some type of scenario or something to explain why you think it would be easier or harder. Okay, so pause the video because we're moving on in 3, 2, 1. All right, so Rome had some social programs that had done some large construction projects. Sorry, read that wrong for a second. Trajan, he again did some really good things. He had a social program that helped poor families in raising and educating their children. Because again, yeah, it's good to help out the rich people, the top people, the most influential people, but you gotta help out the bottom people because there's a lot more of them, for one. Two, they are like the working class people of your country. So if you have a bunch of people who think 2 plus 2 equals stapler, you're going to be hurting. Your country is really going to be hurting. So they wanted to make sure that these kids were fed, that they were healthy, that they were educated, so that they too can contribute to making their country better and contribute to the economy, contribute to architecture, contribute to in whichever way they could when they got older. But still, they're contributing and they're proud of where they're from. Now, Hadrian and Trajan, these two things happened during their times, basically building of aqueducts. Now, if you look at the picture right there, aqueducts are basically taking water from one place to another using nothing but gravity. Okay, so they were able to get water traveling from one part of the country to another part using no pumps, no electricity, no engines or anything like that. It's just basically using gravity to send these aqueducts or send water to wherever it needed to go. Here's the thing, though. This is pretty cool. Some of these aqueducts are still around to this day. They're still standing. That's how well built these things were. Okay, and if you see the curve on these bridges and stuff like that, they didn't have steel. Okay, they did not have any type of steel or metal, or they used wood or anything like that. No, there's a key thing to make an arc, and it's called a keystone. It's the middle part of that arc. It's a middle part. It's called the keystone. Basically, you can get anything, and build it up, but that keystone is the most important thing. If that's strong, if that middle part is strong, it will hold up the rest of the stuff leaning against it. But if you take that keystone out, they're just going to collide and just crash. Okay, and we'll be talking about that later on in history. So by 200 AD, the Roman Empire covered about 3.5 million square miles. Just to give you an understanding, the United States is 3.7 million square miles. Okay, so it was pretty big. Okay, now they traded with everyone. They traded with whoever had stuff that they wanted or citizens wanted. So they traded as far as China. Chances are that will probably be a test question. All right, like how far did Rome trade with, or who was the farthest that Rome traded with? China. Okay. Now the thing is, although the trade business was good, things like that, and it made the money, farming was still the most popular job, because there was plenty of it to go around. Some people just, would rather farm as opposed to building stuff or, being a merchant and things like that, or being a soldier. Now, here's another thing, too. Slavery was huge in Rome. I mean, it's huge. And like the Aztecs, they wouldn't just kill people they fought against. They would capture them. Their goal was basically to capture them and return them as slaves. Now, the most popular slaves that people wanted were Greeks. They wanted the Greek slaves because the Greeks were taught. They were schooled. Okay, these weren't dumb slaves. These were actually people who were very intelligent. And they wanted them so that they could be tutors. They could be, teach their children how to read, write, do math. They wanted them for being musicians, doctors, artists, shop assistants, people who made things, crafted things like this marble statue you see to the side here. That was a Greek. They had skills. Now, the other slaves from other countries, granted, they probably were not like knuckleheads, like, I don't know how to do things. But I'm sure they were very intelligent too, but you couldn't be sure. You couldn't be sure. The Greeks, however, you were sure that they were educated. You were sure, you could put your bottom dollar on it that they were smart. These other slaves, you didn't know. The Germanic slaves, who knows? The Carthaginians, So they were used as cooks, valets, waiters, cleaners, gardeners, jobs that basically nobody else really wanted, you know, to do. So they made them. Also, the slaves built roads and public buildings. So they had them into construction as well. So why have our soldiers build something when we can have slaves do it? Okay. Um, Now, the thing is, some of these slaves they couldn't take it anymore, and one slave in particular who was a gladiator, he was forced to be a gladiator because he was a soldier before. He was actually, I believe, a Roman soldier, if I remember right, the story. His name was Spartacus, and he led a um, uh, a revolt, you know. And so basically, they took over. They, excuse me for a second. Sorry about that. They fought against their captors and got out free. Now, the thing is, he ran out, and people followed him, and they fought against a couple battalions of Roman soldiers, and they won. Because again, a lot of these gladiators were soldiers. They just either quit, left, whatever it may be, um, didn't follow orders. I don't know. But the thing is, they could fight. So they fought the Roman armies a couple times and they won. But the thing was, eventually, Spartacus was captured. He was executed. And the thing is, 6,000 of his followers, the people who helped him get out, people who helped him fight against the Roman soldiers, they were crucified. So there were about 6,000 of them. Now, here's my question to you. If you were a soldier fighting against Rome, and you knew if you were taken alive you'd be a slave, would you fight to the death, or would you rather be? I'll fight as much as I can, but I'd rather live. I just want to live. I don't want to die. You know. And why did you make that decision? So what would you do? Okay, what would you do? So go ahead and pause the video because we're moving on in three, two, one. All right, so here's the thing. At the end of Pax Romana, this is where things started to get really, really bad. Because, again, Pax Romana focused on not only listening to the rich, but also helping the poor. And that became less and less and less. So it got to the point where the separation between rich and poor was so massive that the rich were living in these nice villas, beautiful homes, things like that, big, luxurious, while the poor lived in these apartment blocks called insulae. Now, the insulaes were very poorly, badly built. I mean, they were just. I mean, I can't stress enough how bad it was built. I think it was like the worst slums, and times that like by 10. Okay, but you have to remember back then. Um, thing is that they would often collapse. So imagine a building just out of the blue, just like shaking, also just like that, with people inside and things like that. So yeah, it was pretty bad. The floors are made of wood, right? And sometimes they would catch on fire. Now I've had some students in the past ask me, well, why would they catch on fire? If people knew that that was wood. Well, you have to remember, people used stoves back then, not like what we have now, but um, basically like wood stoves to keep the house or the area heated. Because again, remember, these things were not built well, so walls would crack, air would get through and get really cold, things like that. So candles too, because remember, light. You can't really. They had no electricity back then, so candles was the only way you could see at night. Also lamps. And what happened is sometimes the candles would fall, the lamps, would like drop, and the floors would catch on fire. Now, the thing is, as you guys may or may not know, once wood starts to burn, it just spreads. The next thing is going to get hot, going to get the fire just goes from one thing to another to another to another. So fire spreads very quickly. And if you've been watching the news about the wildfires here in California, you know that's what happens quickly. Okay, imagine someone's, you know, floor is somebody else's roof. And if that collapses, all that wood and all that stuff coming down, it's going to fall. And fire doesn't just go out right there and then. So if there's blankets, if there's any type of other stuff that can catch fire, that's going to catch fire too. And then all that weight on this now other floor is somebody else's roof, and it might just collapse again. So that's how the fire went and they spread. One of the most famous fires basically burnt up a huge section of the poor housing in Rome. And there's a legend that the guy who was in charge, Nero, the emperor, that he played the fiddle while Rome burned. That's a lie. Okay, it's in one of those things that people are taught and they believe it, but in reality, it never happened because, for one, the fiddle wasn't invented at the time Nero was emperor. So how could he play an instrument that didn't exist at the time? Okay, but yeah, it feels some people even think that he started the fire. No. So here is your exit ticket. Go ahead and pick one of the objective questions and answer it. Make sure that you're not very vague. Make sure you answer it completely. So first one, who are some other Roman leaders besides Julius Caesar's, and what did they accomplish? So you got several of them we talked about. So pick one, and what did they do? What are two differences and similarities between Greek slaves and other slaves? So two things they had in common. Okay. And lastly, why would the wildfires in Insulating's apartment would have happened in the Pax Romana times? So during the time when everyone's being taken care of, things are going well for the country, do you think that this incident would have happened with the apartments being caught on fire and spreading and some of that? Do you think that would happen during that Pax Romana time? Why or why not? And explain. Okay. So once you finish that, you are done with this class. Again, make sure you hit submit. Again, also, if you didn't do last week's quizzes, be sure you get that done. Okay. All right. So that's it. You guys have a good day. You take care. Be safe.